Hello, 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 everyone, and welcome to Have You Heard? I am Arlyssa Heard, and I am a Detroiter and a parent and a community activist and advocate and all of the things here in the city of Detroit. And this is a podcast that is going to talk about all things revolving around education. And welcome to the first episode of Have You Heard? Today, I just want to give you a little bit because we all know that schools are the center of our communities, and education is at the very foundation of pretty much everything that we do. It is where our children learn, we socialize, and all of these things. However, there are other things that impact our lives in education. It's not just academics. It's not just about matriculating through systems and getting degrees. However, there are other things that affect what happens in schools, and we want to deal with some of that today. I want to introduce first of all, I have my a guest here with me, a very, very interesting, dynamic young man here. I say young, but probably not. I shouldn't say young man.
Oh, I'm young.
Oh, yeah, you're young. Okay, not an old
36
man.
is young.
36 is young, but it's not old, but it's not too young. It's not.
Yeah.
So you're right there. Okay,
I got grays in my beard.
Oh, you do have grays in your beard, and that's good though. But that's wisdom. So, but I want to say welcome and hello to my wonderful guest here, Jonathan Shropshire.
Ooh.
I got the name right. You don't have any idea how many times I tried to practice this name and didn't get it right.
Close.
I got close.
You did a really great job.
Oh, I still messed it up?
Shropshire.
Oh, my goodness.
You put the shine in there. But we always shining.
Shropshire shines. Okay, we're just going to say that. Anyway, listen, I'm gonna get this name right by the end.
That's right. Amen.
But now, the interesting thing about Jonathan is that, well, I'm gonna just give you all the different types. He's a mentor. He is an advocate. He is an author that I just recently found out, and all of the things, but I don't want to mess up any more than what I already have with this name and what he does. But can you just give us a little bit about, well, who you are?
Absolutely.
And what you do?
Yeah. Well, I think the best title that I can describe myself is a servant. I'm a servant of the people, servant of the Lord. I have been working with youth since I've been 17 years old.
17 to 36.
So
Let me do the math on that. That's right. Oh, so okay, maybe
years.
you are. Well, technically, you are an old man then. Technically, all the stuff. Okay.
Somebody, I'm an old man.
Okay.
The kids think I'm an old.
Yeah. Well,
But like you said, I've done a lot of things. I've been working with youth. I've had mentoring and tutoring programs, family programs, workforce development. All the things, serving the youth, feeding the homeless, feeding the community, resources. Now I'm really proud to say I'm working more in the communal space and adjacent with the young people. But community, young people are my heart, and I've been doing that for a very long time.
And so that means that you've seen it all, though. And I think today, one of the reasons why I think you just really can really provide some perspective on this is because part of what we're talking about, everybody talks about schools and all the things that it does and get your education. However, there are some things that is happening in our schools and in the city of Detroit, but not just in the city of Detroit, the state of Michigan, and even across the country. And I think before we can get to the academics, we have to also talk about the climate of schools and what's going on in the doors, outside of the doors. And so I just want to give a couple things that I'm just wondering, have people heard about what's been going on lately? And I know we have. I was looking at some, I think it comes from West Africa, this phrase that talks about how are the children, or are the children well? And that is the the greeting. And, that sounds so, it sounds kind of cliche. Yes, the children are doing fine. But when you really think about that question, when you're talking about in terms of community and society and where we are, when you ask if the children are well, if you take a pause at that, there are so many things that come out of it. And just looking at what's happening in our schools today, we're hearing about incidents across the city, like within the last 12 months in some of our Detroit schools, where the children have incidents of violence and bullying. There was an incident where we even had in a Detroit school a few months ago where the daughter was being bullied or the child was being bullied. And this is K through 8. And, for whatever reason, leadership didn't respond right away to the mother's cries about it. So the mom gives her a knife to take to school for protection, and somebody ended up getting stabbed. But not just that, we're seeing fights, we're seeing teachers being jumped, we're seeing children fighting amongst each other, the teasing and all of these things. And even though statistics tell us that nationally now that there has been a decline with physical fights over the last decades or so, what seems to be really trending upward is they call it cyberbullying, but I'm just looking at all of the beefs and stuff that's starting on social media that spill over into the schools. And even to the degree where we see even some of the teenage takeovers and all of that, not necessarily saying that those things, it starts on social media, but looking at teenagers and people being in the streets and fights happening, I'm just asking, what is going on with the behavior? What does it indicate? Are we paying attention? What is your take on that? What's happening in the schools? What's your take? What's going on?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I got a lot of hot takes that are very unpopular, so I might get canceled after saying what I'm about to say. But I do feel like the internet, I always say this, the internet is one of the worst things that has ever happened to our society. I think it takes some of the worst things in our communities and it amplifies it and gives it a voice that is like a tornado that begins to wreck our communities, and it normalizes abnormal behavior. So it makes people think that these behaviors are normal. To fight, to bully, to flash guns in the air, it becomes cool, and it normalizes behavior that was never known to be things that we honor in our community. From the history of African Americans, we have never been known to glorify drugs and a lot of these things. So I think that Internet, one, is a very powerful tool at helping the dissonance that is going on in our community. But two, everyone says this: the parents, it's the parents, it's the parents, and unfortunately, it is the parents, but not for the same reasons that people think it is. I think people think that parents aren't showing up for their children in the way that they're supposed to. But when you really look at the average parent, especially from our urban lens, the average parent is exhausted. They're tired, they're overworked, they're underpaid. And then we have them show up for so many different things. We want them to be politically understanding. We want them to contribute educationally. We want them to be able to hold their own and have a life outside of being a mom, a father, a sister, a brother, or whatever else titles that they may have, a community advocate. And we have a lot of expectations that we put on parents, but there isn't a lot of support that we offer parents at the same time. And so what happens when a parent is overworked, underpaid, and no support? Their children are going to reflect that. Their behavior is going to reflect unsupported. A child is going to reflect, especially don't let them be starving.
So what happens in that? Because we hear, especially in the schools, we hear a lot about teachers being blamed because they're not managing their classrooms well. Teachers being blamed if children are failing. Parents are blamed when children are misbehaving or fights and all of these things. And I'm wondering how do you heal that? Do children, are we able to hold children accountable without sacrificing or criminalizing their childhood. What age group, do schools bear responsibility to help when we're talking about restorative practices and conflict resolution? Where does all of this kind of come together? Because we see a lot. I think there are even some. I know at one time, I don't even know if there are some parents are being held legally responsible for some of the things. Of course, obviously, if a minor does something, and in some cases, parents are being held legally responsible. Even at one time, parents could be ticketed or held liable in cases of truancy. But when it comes to the climate in schools, when you have all of these things, you talked about the internet, but the internet is here to stay. How do we use those same tools and still be able to manage classrooms? When you have kids that are being bullied, and then we see it all the time. I mean, I can't even turn on social media without a fight being recorded. It's almost as if recording a fight or recording a dispute, even not just with children, even with the adults, it's almost like people would rather record rather than call intervention or stop somebody from breaking it up. So I know that you have mentoring groups and all of that. Have there been situations where even maybe some of your kids have experienced some things? And how is there anything that you do to help them work or walk through this conflict? How do you resolve it? How do you help children to dysregulate? Who's responsible for that? How much of the schools are responsible? Because it seems like everybody, as adults, it seems like we all have a responsibility to respond.
Say that. The community. We were a community. I remember growing up, I'm a 1990s baby. Communities from the 90s until now is vastly different. Even growing up in church, we ate together.
Every generation says that.
And that's so interesting. But I feel like we're the most disconnected in this generation than we've ever been.
Really?
That's how I feel. That's what I've seen. I remember going over to this person's house, doing dinner at this person's house, people bringing their money together and their time together. We have big family gatherings, and we're inviting our friends and our family. It seems like it was more communal. But I think the responsibility aspect to that question is, and I'm not advocating for this, but I'm just using this as an example about how trusting teachers were to parents. Teachers were so trusted and honored in their position that they were allowed to spank kids when I was a kid. Now, I ain't spanking nobody's kids.
Oh my God. Do you want corporal punishment back in schools?
Nah, I don't want it back in school.
No, I was
because I feel like
my God.
These teachers aren't emotionally intelligent to be able to wield such a power.
I don't know if that was good or not. I remember being paddled as a kid in school. And I'm older than you. So I was a little kid in the 70s. I was a little kid in the 70s. I got a fro now, but I was wearing a fro then, right? Because my sisters were like 13, 14 years older than me. So they were like in, high school and all this. And so I remember us being paddled. And I also remember a teacher throwing me up under a desk and saying, "Doggy, come get your bone." And my mother lit the school up. I remember those things.
Rightfully
and so, I didn't even, I was a little kid. I don't know. But I don't know. I don't know if we were better. I think, but I think
I wouldn't say better. I would just say communal, right?
Yeah, I think the support, the levels of support was different. I think, and I think. What we see now is that some areas of support is not necessarily there.
It's not.
Some people, now let me ask you this though. Some people, we hear folks say that after COVID, things got worse. Do you believe that in terms of when it comes to, because I think, educationally, but the mental health supports for
100%.
Okay.
100%. I think even in my own life, we had a saying back then, in organizations that people were waking up on 10. Usually a person, as a stress level, when they wake up, average person may wake up on 4 and they go to work and, might end the day off with a 7 or something like that. People
might.
were literally waking
I
up
might end the day off
on 10. Just stressed when you get up in the morning.
On 10? No,
Yeah.
okay,
I mean, but that's what COVID did. It's
okay.
We have a glimpse to see how prisoners in America are treated. It drives you manic being sick and shut into a confined space for a long period of time. And we don't think that level of isolation and separation from our common man does something to our psyche. We would be foolish to believe that it didn't. And when you compound that with the education, with feeling stressed, with some people trying to get out the mud and some people doing illegal activities just to survive in that time, it's a lot to comprehend and go through.
Yeah, I've heard. So there were things that folks were saying I think COVID, because it set us all down at the same time, especially in the schools.
Yeah.
We really saw things. I think parents even got a glimpse of what it's like to have children inside their
work
homes
with your
all day.
kids.
And then we also
teachers wouldn't mind.
and then teachers also had lives too, because they also had children. But then I think it showed us a lot of things, but especially in terms of mental health. What we've heard is that it wasn't so much that children became more violent after COVID, but it was just that the levels of trauma and the stressors that they had to deal with, they were less equipped to handle.
Yeah,
and so how do you, I'm thinking about that because we've even heard of all these different things that were happening around the country, and that's a lot.
It is.
People, they experienced loss, there was grief, people died. And then I know even for my own son, he started high school during COVID, and that was a transition year for him. And it was kind of like everything that he had learned, it was almost like he learned nothing else once he started, because, you were inside of a house and trying to get your, virtual learning and all that. But now that we're, quote, so-called back to normal, we have a lot of things happening in the classrooms. And so I'm just wondering, do you think this is something, what can schools do about it? What do you think? What do you think is missing?
Yeah, I think the teachers feel unsupported by the parents. There's no accountability, and it's almost impossible to hold students accountable. A lot of schools are adopting restorative methods, which is beautiful. But
is it working?
If you're not good at it, it's not going to work.
Do you see it work in the schools that you ever saw? Are they using all of the steps for restorative practices? Because we hear about this, but we're wondering are they really doing it?
Yeah, I mean, we say rules without relationships is going to equal rebellion. And so if you don't have a relationship, restoratives hinges on having relationships with youth. If you don't care about youth and you're teaching, you're doing a wrong practice. A lot of our teachers are so tired of caring because they've been in the system getting choked out administrationally that when you show up to serve a kid, you don't, it's like your life, like you said, already starting on 10. So it's hard for you to show up and care about a young person's beyond the already frustrations of getting disrespected. Some of our teachers get paid pretty good now, but there was a time where teachers were fighting for good pay.
They're still, wait a minute.
Is true.
It's still, I mean, certain sets. So I know a lot of times that happens in our Detroit public school system. They're up.
Yeah, they came up.
The starting pay is up. And a lot of times teachers leave the district and go elsewhere after they've gotten a few years in the city because of the skills or whatever they pick up. They can get hired in other settings, maybe for a little bit more money, but maybe not as many kids in the classroom. And those are also some of the things too, because we're seeing, we talk about teachers, but when you're looking at classroom size, when you're looking at resources, there's just not a lot of teachers there. And so I'm wondering how much of that plays into some of what we see that's in our schools where there's just so much tension.
Yeah.
But the schools aren't going anywhere.
They're not.
The internet isn't going anywhere. And teachers are still going to teach. Parents are still there. Our communities communities are still standing. And how do we start to change some of this? Because what's happening outside the school doors, I always say all the time, shows up inside the classroom.
Absolutely, 100%.
And then because of the internet and all these other things, what's happening on the internet and in schools can also spill over into communities. And I think we just have this cycle. But how do we change those things? Okay, welcome back to Have You Heard, everybody, where we're talking about school climate and have things gotten out of control? Are children more violent? I wanted to, I'm here with Jonathan Shropshire. Listen, I've been messing up his name the whole time, but there were some stats. You know, we were talking about the things that you're seeing and working with children and children that you mentor. And we're talking about the city of Detroit, but we all know that what's happening inside the school walls in terms of the violence and the bullying and all that is just not local. So I just had a couple of stats that I wanted to just read through. So this is according to the CDC and StopBullying.gov. Approximately 1 in 5 students report being bullied at school. That's at school. Now, this is nationwide, and roughly about 19% of student ages 12 to 18 reported being bullied. Now, this is during the 21-22 school year. But what's interesting about that is middle school students, as of the 24-25 school year, we're looking at middle school students report the highest incidences of being bullied compared to high school students, roughly about 26.3%, to high school students, 15.7%. And that's just what's reported. Also, I found this interesting. Female students had reported the higher incidences than male students. Female students reports 21% versus 16.7% of male students. And rural area students, and this is where sometimes we kind of have a particular picture in our head about what this is. Rural students, 24% reported higher instances than city, 19%, and then versus suburban, 17%. And I was thinking, in the percentages with female students versus males, I wonder, is that because typically male children may not be as willing to tell it as a woman would. That's just interesting. I don't know. Yeah. But what is definitely up is this whole thing. And I think we said this earlier about the cyberbullying and all of the social media beefs and all of that. And specifically in Michigan, in the 24-25 school year, roughly 10,920 bullying incidents were reported and recorded, and 893 victims of violent crimes instances of violence, I should say, during the school years. And that's not just physical fights. That could be just pretty much anything. But so, and then what I was also looking into is that even though they say some things may not be as high as it was 10 or 15 years ago, the perception is that it is. And I think that is because we see so much of this online. Yeah. You mentioned earlier when we were talking about, like, you know, where is the solution to, where is all of this going? Because we can't continue to allow all of this conflict to continue on. And you mentioned something I thought was very key about relationships and how important that was. And building on relationships. And you talked about these restorative practices, whether or not schools are doing it, if they're being held accountable to this. Why do you think relationship building is some of the way to go in maybe even, is it going to change things, you think? Or is this, how do you, where do we go with that? Why is that so important? Why do you think that's so important?
I think, I believe that the most basic need that a human has is to feel loved and understood, to feel valued. And that only happens in relationships. In relationships, we can understand one another. We can instill value and empower kids to feel like they're supported and loved. I think most of the time, if you don't have a home that you feel valued, supported, and loved, kids will, like you said, show up in school and their behavior will reflect not feeling any type of value, loved, or support. But a good teacher, and this has happened in many, many testimonies from friends, even my own life, that when you feel supported, when you feel valued, when you feel loved, there is a different trajectory and path that is illuminated for that kid, and maybe they take that decision and maybe they sometimes they don't, but the path gets illuminated to know that they can become something greater than what they've experienced or what they're going through. And that only happens based off of relationships, getting to know a kid and loving them beyond just the educational platform and seeing the potential in them,
like what
and
you
fostering
are,
that.
like what you are doing. I would imagine that you have built relationships with children over the years, and so I'm sure you have instances. But describe what is it? Have you had children circle back to you? You've been in this game 17 years? Well, for a long time. Have you had students or other folks that you have mentored circle back to you? And what have you noticed, like changes in how that relationship helped build them to what they are today?
Yeah. I mean, all the time. I've seen kids literally grow up, in college and now have families of their own, which is crazy because I'm just a young man. But to be able to see that for myself is just incredible. And all the time, I can be walking with my family, walking down the street, and a car will pull aside. My kids will get a little nervous. The window will roll down, and they'll be like, "John, how you doing?" And I'll run up to the car, and
it's been
just
years,
a kid.
like since she's okay.
Yeah, it's just a kid being a kid.
Okay.
Just them, just remembering the relationship.
They remember that.
Sometimes their families get displaced outside of the community, and they have to go live somewhere else or whatever. Right. But when we see each other, it's like they remember how they were treated. So people don't always remember what you say, but they remember how you made them feel.
Yeah.
And so when a kid feels like they are supported, they're valued, and they're loved, the response that they give, not only to you, but those that are around them, can be tremendous.
So I think, that is a very interesting point, because when the children are well, when the children feel supported, it's only up from there. It's almost like society, communities win when our children are strong. I think I've heard the famous quote by Frederick Douglass that it's easier to build strong children than repair broken men.
That's right.
And I think there is there's a lot to be said in that. But I think sometimes we also have heard, folks growing up like children are to be seen and not heard and all of those things. But I think, first of all, that's really not the way that we need to go. But especially since our children spend so much time in schools and in a building with other adults who are training them and teaching them. And it's not just always about enrolling just that one child. When the child is enrolled in a school, we're talking about enrolling in their families. You talk about building the relationships and how children feel supported. Do you see instances, and I think you may have gotten into this a little bit earlier, but do you see instances in some of the children you work with, even with the families, where the children are not necessarily supported by the family, and maybe it's because maybe that family is struggling.
Yeah, for sure.
And what has that been like that you've seen?
Yeah, I just had a conversation this morning with someone. I made a phone call to see if their child was going to come to camp, and they're like, he's living with his father. And they described to me the dynamic of what's going on in the situation. And what I said to them was, make sure you text your son while he's over there, because he still needs his mom. And one day he's going to grow up and you want him to say, you know, I'm the man I am today because of the contributions that my mom has made. You know, but she was ready to be done with them because of the conflict, right? That
between
her and the son.
Her and the son. Oh,
Yeah,
I see
yeah.
where you at. Okay.
But because
How old is this child?
the child is about 12 years old,
Okay.
11 or 12.
Yeah. That's
And,
it.
you know, he's around that age. He's
That's
a
that
bigger
age.
kid, you
Okay.
know. But I think that people don't want to do the work. And we always, in our society, we want to escape doing the work, right? We want to escape going to work, and we want to escape doing the work. Our relationships in our community cannot change unless somebody puts boots on the ground and builds real relationships, has very authentic, restorative times with kids. We don't want to do the work.
Do you think it's that don't want to do the work or don't really know how and where to start?
I think that when a student is ready, a teacher will appear. I think that people have given up hope on their children before they've exhausted all of their resources to help them.
Now, what if when you say people have given up hope on their children, and we're talking about school culture and climate, because I think it's very important what you're saying is because if that, I'm just rolling with what you're saying, if that is the case, where maybe a family has given up hope, or in this situation where you had the mother and the son, there's conflict there, and he's 11, 12 years old. So that sounds like, here, you're going to have to go live with your daddy because I can't do this anymore because of whatever is happening. And that is a lot of what goes on in families where people need support. And so now this is that time. And so is it that hope is given up, it's exhaustion, or do we just know how to support our kids? Because when that child goes back into the school system, starting in August or September, what is that child going to be dealing with emotionally, mentally, physically, whatever all of that, the family dynamics bring, whatever the summer brings, how does that child now show up in a classroom with 30 or 40 other kids or 25 other kids, with administrators and leaders who may or may not know what's going on?
Yeah, for sure.
You know, because, and then how does that child show up? Does he show up as a bully? Does he show up being bullied? Does he show up more violent or withdrawn? These are just some of the things. You talked about relationship, but you know, back again to the parent thing. Is this something that parents have the ability to just do by themselves? How many of us need to be included in this thing to turn some of this around?
Yeah. I mean, I think we have to know each other very well, right? And so when we don't know each other very well, there's somebody here to investigate, and they call that CPS. When we don't know what's going on in that house and that child is behaving and is getting reports that a child is being treated wrong, now we got to find out what's going on, right? But if the community was involved in your life, and I'm seeing how you discipline your kid, I'm seeing how you're showing up for your kid, there is no accountability that we have one to another to show how we can show up. There was a kid who we did a restorative with, and he mentioned something, you know, my mom gives me a spanking, but who spanks my mom when she's out of line or treats me bad? Who's spanking? But who are parents accountable to? And there's no emotional equity that parents feel like they need to give their children.
This is very interesting because just some of the things that I was also looking into is that how modeling certain behaviors in front of our children, because children are always watching. And so, and it's not, you know, I'm not necessarily a fan of laying everything at the parent's doorstep. I get it. I get it and I understand it, but I think it's just a little bit more involved in that. But some of our parents don't really know how to, like, deregulate. You know, I'm looking at, we've seen instances how parents may show up to a school, how a parent may handle conflict.
Absolutely.
We see families fighting. We see and it's all online. Anybody can look. We see people crashing out at the dollar store or Family Dollar.
Yes.
For some reason, Walmart. For some reason, all kinds of crazy stuff we see happening in the stores. But I'm looking at how, and then we've even seen where there are even more almost deadly instances where young children are witnessing parents or all these other adults doing all these things in front of them, and then they get into a school climate, and then we expect them to do
thrive.
what?
Yeah.
And so what does that mean? I've even seen cases where teachers have even gone online and did video and just, I think, revealed entirely too much information about what's wrong inside their schools. And so we've got all of these things happening and playing out before us. And but I just have to just let you know, there's a lot of times we talk about, in the schools, but our schools are also facing some real life things that are happening that I think is not helping towards building on some of these practices you're talking about. We're looking at staff shortages, not just teachers, but school counselors. We're looking at in terms of special education, there's lots of shortages there. We hear all the time about psychologists and mental health. A lot of these things are missing that could possibly be helpful and supportive to our kids. And what does that look like at the end of a school year or 3 years or 4 years and 5 years?
Yeah.
What do you have to say about that?
My crazy thought is I think that eventually the government is going to say, I will incentivize you homeschooling your child.
Woo, you getting in my lane now.
I believe that that's going to come down the pipeline very, very soon.
That is actually being floated right now.
Because when you look at what's going on,
we're seeing that.
I think
we're seeing
at this
kids
point
are being suspended and pushed online learning already.
Yes.
We already said that's definitely happening.
Everything is shifting towards, because kids are, the rules and the handcuffs for what teachers can do as far as suspension and home phone calls is already getting less and less and less. But I think we're shifting that way, and I'm here for it. I've homeschooled my kids. It takes work, but I think that if that happens, parents
we're not gonna. We're those of us. Those of us who are strongly standing for free and public schools, we definitely do not want that to happen. Realizing that some people have to have that option, but I am a strong believer that we just cannot turn everybody's living room into a classroom and a virtual classroom. It just COVID gave us a sample of that. But anyway, go ahead.
I think what's interesting is, in societies around the world, it thrives on community and children being with their parents. And so
we need that relationship you were talking about. We need to.
But children need an outlet outside of their parents, of course. And that's where the community comes in. So if you homeschool, you can have, cohorts where kids come together, they have social interactions and learn how to.
What about recreation centers? Where are the
and that's
the
another thing, right?
activities?
But I think our Mayor Sheffield is doing a really great job at promoting activities in recreational centers for children to go through in the summertime.
Some things,
So that's on the rise, and I say I'm here for that, because I think that kids need something to do.
They need it out.
They need to feel like what they are doing is contributing to something more greater than themselves. And teams, anything with teams.
Do you think that's going to reduce some of the energy and maybe conflict and violence and different things that are happening in the schools?
I think it could.
It can contribute
when they see what is attached to their to that outcome, right? So if I like playing basketball and I know my behavior, my grades, and there's an incentive behind basketball, maybe I make a big incentive, like every at the end of the game, you'll get $100 to be able to do X, Y, and Z. I'm just throwing something out there. But if there's an incentive attached to, me doing something, then maybe I might have a better chance to show up in a different space.
Whatever happened to the old-fashioned incentives like thank you, or here, you get a nice handshake. And
Long are the days.
That's not working no more.
Long are the days. I think
it's about money.
Kids,
we need money.
Kids have too much access. Like that's not going to work anymore.
No,
now they
it's
see how other kids live around the world. So it's impossible for me to say, thank you. You've done a great job.
Thank you. You've done a good job.
Pat on the back when they see kids have $1 million businesses. And, you know, I mean, it's the spirit of comparison is very, very difficult. But I feel like if we incentivize parents and children in more meaningful ways, makes the financial burden a little bit easier on the parent. They might be able to take less hours at work and show up for the kids. They might be able to do certain things.
Do you think we need to have organizations or qualified folks to come into classrooms and literally teach not just conflict resolution, but relationship building skills and how to, you know, like, what do you call it when it's relationship building, but it's also kind of almost like this peer accountability things. And even for families, do you think schools can benefit from that kind of resource?
Yeah. So
to help
I work for an organization, shout out to the union. We have a program called SWAG. It stands for Students with Awareness and Goals. We go inside the schools during the school day because kids really don't go to after-school programs anymore like they used to.
I'm mad that you just now inserting this, but we're going to lift this up. Okay, yes.
We go inside of the schools and we have programs and the teachers.
And it's called SWAG.
It's called SWAG, Students with Awareness and Goals. We play games, we go through activities, we teach them healthy relationships and boundaries, and we talk to them about restorative. And the feedback that we got from the kids, it's one thing to get feedback from the teachers to say you're being effective. It's another thing to have a kid express how what you're teaching them is effective and how they move and how they navigate their regular relationships.
Yeah.
It is a powerful, powerful thing about what relationships could really do because we can't control what everyone
what age
does.
Group? What is the
that was
age
high
groups?
school that I just so me and shout out to my partner who has a business called Restorative Solutions, who teaches restoratives on a big level to schools. But
that's part of the SWAG that's all under the SWAG program?
That isn't the restorative, but the union does pay for restorative to go and do parent trainings and youth trainings for restorative.
Is that like high school, middle school?
High school, middle school, a little bit of elementary as well. Yep.
And our parents in those kinds of programs, have parents been pretty responsive? I mean, if they
definitely definitely. I think it gives people tools. You know, Antoine Crowder has a great saying. He says, "I'm teaching hurt people that have been hurt by other people how to get along."
Okay.
And the very interesting thing is, we all have been hurt by someone.
We have, all of us,
and we don't know how to approach those conversations. We don't even know how to exist in the same space with them. But it gives us language and it gives us tools on how to respond in situations and how to navigate tragic situations in a way that is progressive. And we've seen it work when it's applied in the right way.
Yeah, I like that. All right. So welcome back. Have you heard? We are in our last few minutes of talking here with my friend Jonathan. I'm just going to say Jonathan S. Because at this point, I don't know what I might say. But I do know that he's shining in Shropshire. Listen, we're going to get it right.
There you go.
Hey,
there you go.
See, that's what I'm telling you. Ha! Yeah, Shonda. Anyway, but anyway, yeah. So we've been really just talking about climate in schools. We've kind of been talking about a lot of stuff.
A lot.
But basically, I think some of the main things is relationships and the importance. And you talked about this program that's currently running in schools. We need more of that. Connecting with kids, helping them. To get to know who they are, kind of emotional regulation and all of these other things, and just teaching how to navigate conflict. And some of the stuff you talked about is how you've seen children that it may not necessarily being supported, whether it be via the family, community, and all of that. But just, kind of as we wrap up, just your overall take. What is it that you want the community to know about our children, about our schools, and what you're seeing as you reach out to families and mentoring those children? What is it that you want to just leave folks with? What hope?
Yeah, children are so valuable and they're so precious. They are filled with such endless potential. We can never know truly how great a child will become. And I think they can become as great as the investments that are made in them. The amount of investments made in a child, they can go on and do great things around the world. And we have to start thinking a lot more macro instead of addressing situations and reducing kids to their, negative behavior. We have to be able to see their value and their potential beyond what they are doing, love them where they are, inspire their hope, and continue to reinforce the good things.
Yeah. I think that's well said. Just in these things as we navigate these streets, I think we have to realize that not only are we raising children and families, and not just the traditional families, but we are training our children to be the future next set of society that continues to carry it on. And we want them to be equipped and emotionally stable and able to navigate the world despite all of the many challenges. But I just wanted folks to, I just have some thoughts, as we talk about schools, and I really, really believe that schools are the center of our communities. It is where everything shows up that's happening in a kid's life. And when children are out of school and once they graduate and move on and do whatever it is they're going to do, they are going to be people in society that help to contribute to advance the society or to make us go backwards. What we have to also remember as we talk about these things in our schools, and it's easy to get over into what violence does to our communities and all of the disruptive behaviors and things that are happening inside the schools as well. But we have to also just remember that bullying and school violence are not simply discipline problems. They are public health, community, and educational equity issues. And I think we see that as a result of having lack of resources. And when we're looking at shortages in classrooms with all of the things that kids need, these are some of the, I think, the fallout that happens. But so, and even though we can talk about what we can do to be more secure in our schools as it relates to violence and behavior, the goal should not just be to just create schools that are more secure, but I strongly believe that the goal should be to create schools that are more connected, more responsive, and more human. And I think that's what we were really talking about here today, about why relationships matter and restoring our people to a wholeness so that we can continue to heal. So, everybody, have you heard? I want you to go to all social media platforms and like and share, and let's get this moving, folks. And remember, the next time you hear someone say, "How you doing?" or "What's going on?" ask them, "Are the children well?" Have a good one.